In the months before the tsunami came, the sea started giving up its dead. Along the coast of Japan, one by one, they washed ashore, enormous silver bodies, some longer than a car, ribbon-thin, with a crest of red spines rising from the skull like a crown. The fishermen knew the old name for them, Ryugu no Tsukai, the messenger from the palace of the Dragon King, a creature said to rise from the deep only to warn of catastrophe. In 2011, the catastrophe came, the most powerful earthquake in Japan's recorded history, a tsunami that killed nearly 20,000 people, and people remembered the silver bodies on the beach. For most of human history, this was the only way anyone ever met this animal, already dead or dying in the shallows where it was never meant to be. Sailors called it the sea serpent. They said it could reach 60 feet, coil around a ship, and drag it under. Every culture that found one built a monster out of it, because a corpse was all they ever had. They were wrong about almost everything. But here's the part that should stop you. When scientists finally met one alive, and it took until this century to manage it, the real animal turned out to be stranger than any legend they'd invented for it. A creature that hunts a lightless world by smell alone. That borrows light from the animals it's stalking to make itself vanish. That, when survival gets expensive enough, cuts away pieces of its own body to stay alive. This is World Untangled, and this is the oarfish, the longest bony fish on Earth. A creature we spent 200 years describing from its own dead body and only just began to understand. Science first described the oarfish back in the 1700s from a body that washed up on a European beach. And for the next 2 centuries, that was the entire method. Wait for the ocean to hand over a corpse. Measure it. Guess. Consider how little that gave us. Across every coastline on Earth, in all that time, fewer than 250 oarfish strandings have ever been documented. For an animal that can grow past 8 meters, nearly 30 feet, that number is almost impossible to believe. When one does appear, it's an event. In 2013, an 18-foot oarfish washed up near Catalina Island in California. It took 15 people to carry it out of the water. The reason we so rarely see them starts to make sense once you learn where they actually live. The twilight zone, a few hundred meters down, where the last of the sunlight dies and the water goes still. Not calm, still. So free of current that an animal living there has no reason to build muscle at all. The oarfish is, quite literally, a creature of total stillness. A gelatinous silver ribbon with no scales, just a mirror-like coating that throws back whatever faint light reaches it. And it doesn't swim the way anything else does. It hangs vertically, head pointed up toward the surface, tail hanging down into the dark, and moves by rippling the long red fin that runs the length of its spine. Everything else stays motionless. Finding one alive down there is less like exploration and more like trying to spot a single silver thread in the largest, darkest, emptiest space on the planet. So for 150 years, the questions that actually mattered went unanswered. What did it eat? How did it navigate in the dark? How did it ever find another of its kind? A corpse can't tell you any of that. You have to catch it living. The first real break came from an unlikely place, a bad winter. Over a few months in 2014, more than a dozen fresh oarfish washed ashore in southern Japan, enough intact bodies at once for scientists to try something no one had before. They put the oarfish through a CT scanner. The scans found two things nobody expected. The first was the brain. For an animal that can exceed 8 meters, the brain of a giant oarfish is about the size of your thumb. One of the most extreme brain-to-body ratios of any backboned animal alive. The second was stranger. For as long as anyone had examined oarfish, no one had ever managed to find their nostrils. The scans finally located them, tucked at the very front of the snout, opening forward, essentially inside the mouth. Which means that to smell anything at all, the oarfish has to swim with its jaws cracked open, pumping water across those hidden nostrils, turning its head to sense which direction a scent is strongest. Think about what that means. This is an animal that doesn't hunt the dark with intelligence. It hunts with chemistry. Mouth cracked open, head slowly turning, tracking invisible trails through black water. A brain the size of a thumb, navigating the largest habitat on Earth by scent alone. And that reframed the old legend in a way no one saw coming. Because if the oarfish lives by detecting the faintest chemical traces in the water, and it lives above one of the most tectonically active regions on Earth, then the old story about it sensing disaster suddenly deserved an honest look. So in 2019, a team of Japanese researchers actually tested it. They compared decades of deep-sea fish sightings against decades of earthquake records. If the legend were true, the strandings should cluster before the big quakes. They didn't. Across the entire dataset, they found exactly one case where a major earthquake struck within 30 days and 100 kilometers of a sighting. One, the oarfish almost certainly rises to the surface for a much sadder reason, because it's sick, injured, or dying, carried up out of a deep it can't survive leaving. So the omen was a coincidence. The messenger of the Dragon King was just a dying fish. And yet, this is a creature built to read tiny changes in water it can't even see. Whether it could register something we can't is a question scientists haven't fully closed. The legend didn't survive the numbers, but the animal underneath it only got more interesting. For all of this, one thing was still missing. Nobody had ever watched an oarfish alive, in its own world. That changed by accident. Off the coast of Nice, in the Mediterranean, scientists had anchored an oceanographic buoy in deep water, a piece of equipment built to measure the color of the sea. But the ocean doesn't care what you build something for. Algae grew on the buoy. Small fish came to eat the algae. Bigger fish came to eat the small fish. A scientific instrument quietly became an ecosystem hanging in the open water, and every so often, out of the dark below, an oarfish rose to it. There was a problem, though. Divers exhale, and to an animal that has never encountered a bubble in millions of years of evolution, that single disturbance is enough to send it fleeing back into the black. So the team switched to closed-circuit rebreathers, systems that release nothing into the water, and waited. Eventually, a living oarfish stayed. What they saw rewrote the textbook. The animal wasn't drifting helplessly the way the corpses had suggested. It was in complete control, holding itself perfectly vertical, motionless, steering with nothing but that long ribbon fin, sending waves down its body to move forward, backward, up, and down. It could hold its position in the water like almost nothing else in the ocean. Then they killed their white lights and switched on ultraviolet, and the oarfish lit up. Two glowing organs on its head, one on the forehead, one under the chin, invisible under normal light. And that mirror-bright skin turned out to be a trick. Down in the deep, tiny krill give off their own faint blue glow, and the oarfish's reflective body simply mirrors that ambient light back, making the animal effectively vanish, unseen by the prey it's drifting toward and the predators watching from below. It can barely make light of its own, so it borrows the light around it and disappears, which leaves one haunting question. In a habitat this vast and this dark, how do two of these animals ever find each other? The best answer we have is chemistry. Pheromones released into the current and carried across enormous distances. A scent message meant for no one but another oarfish. They called to each other through the dark, in a language made entirely of smell. There was one detail every diver kept noticing. Almost every living oarfish they saw was missing part of its tail, blunt ends, bodies that seemed to simply stop. The obvious guess was predators. Great white sharks had been spotted near the buoy after all. But the evidence didn't hold up. For an animal this size, the oarfish has almost no confirmed predators, and no shark attack on one has ever actually been documented. The damage wasn't being done to the oarfish. The oarfish was doing it to itself. A lizard can drop its tail once to escape. The oarfish does something stranger, and it can do it again and again, shedding whole sections of its own body well past the halfway point of its length. And the reason isn't escape. It appears to be economics. By amputating the back third of itself, the oarfish shrinks the amount of body it has to keep alive, saving energy for the organs that matter. In a part of the ocean where food is scarce and every calorie counts, it may be the only fish on Earth known to repeatedly cut away parts of itself simply to survive, and it may be ancient in the single known oarfish fossil, more than 2 million years old, shows the same rear body shortening. So what was it eating to end up this starved for energy? Chemistry answered that too. The pigment in an oarfish's flesh, its red fins, even its eggs, all trace back to one source: krill. And in a strange twist, the parasites found inside stranded oarfish turn up again, in their adult form, inside sperm whales, which places the oarfish precisely between the smallest animals in the deep and the largest. A single silver link in the chain that connects krill to whales. The last mystery is how the oarfish begins. In 2019, 2 living oarfish were caught in a net off Okinawa. One was already dead, the other was dying. Before it was gone, researchers managed the first reliable record of oarfish reproduction ever taken, fertilizing around 400 eggs. The eggs were strange on their own, buoyant, bright red, released into the open ocean to drift with no parent, no protection, nothing at all. Most open ocean fish eggs hatch within 1 to 3 days. The oarfish eggs took 18, and then the larvae did something no one could explain. Adult oarfish swim vertically, head up. The hatchlings swam head down, using an entirely different set of fins. Each trailed a single dorsal filament, nearly twice the length of its own body, for reasons nobody has figured out. And despite having working mouths, not one of them ate. Not brine shrimp, not enriched feed, nothing. Across the whole observation, their mouths opened a total of 6 times. Within 4 days, every one of them was dead. So what does a baby oarfish eat in the wild? We still don't know. It may need something so specific to the open ocean that nothing we could offer came close. And that one unanswered question stands in for all the others. We don't know how long they live. We don't know when they spawn. their range is still being redrawn. In 2021, one turned up off Sri Lanka, in an ocean it had never been recorded in before. We built a monster out of the bodies it left behind. The living animal was stranger than the myth the whole time. We just had to go down into the dark and meet it, step back and look at what we actually have. Almost everything we know about the longest fish in the sea, we learned by accident. From a body on a beach, a corpse in a net, a dying animal that drifted up out of a world it was never supposed to leave. We have almost never gone down and met it on its own terms. And if a fish this enormous, this unmistakable 8 meters of silver and red, could stay this hidden for this long, then the real question was never really about the oarfish. It's about everything else down there. Everything that has never washed ashore, never tangled in a net, never risen into the light long enough for us to know it exists. The deep ocean isn't empty. The problem is that almost none of its evidence ever reaches us. The deep ocean is the largest living space on Earth. It drives our climate and our weather. Every night, it hosts the biggest migration on the planet. More life moving up and down through the dark than the great herds of Africa could ever match. And even now, we've mapped the surface of the moon in sharper detail than the floor of our own ocean. So I'm curious, what surprised you most? That the sea serpent was real? That it hunts the dark by smell alone? Or that it cuts off its own body to stay alive? Tell me below. And if this changed the way you picture what's beneath us, you'll like the rest of what we make here. So consider subscribing to World Untangled.